Hi again. A.T. Robertson, The Divinity of Christ in the Gospel of John. Jesus before Pilate. Here John has more to tell, and most of it is new. Pilate is in his official residence, the Praetorium. Now when he says new, he's talking about in contrast to the Synoptic Gospels. Pilate's in his official residence, the Praetorium. It was probably in the Tower of Antonia, and not the palace of Herod. John draws the picture with characteristic vividness. It is early, between dawn and sunrise. The accusers are in a great hurry to get the business through before the populace begins to stir. When they find Jesus, a condemned criminal in the eyes of Roman law, besides the condemnation of the Sanhedrin, the halo will drop from the brow of the Nazarene in the eyes of these Galileans who so recently hailed him as Messiah, in the very faces of the Sanhedrin in the temple. It's all well planned and is moving on with expedition. And yet the conspirators will not enter the Praetorium, for that is a Gentile house, a Gentile's house, even though it's in Jerusalem. They wish to keep on celebrating the Passover, which has already begun. So the accusers stood outside till Pilate went forth to ask for their charge against Jesus. John does not give the charges, but only the haughty assumption of infallibility on the part of the Sanhedrin, though they say nothing of their own trial when Pilate offers to turn Jesus over to them. The reason is that they wish the death of Jesus, and their previous condemnation is futile because they do not at this time possess the power of life and death. By the way, that power had been taken away by the Romans just a generation or so before. They probably here brought forward the accusations against Jesus mentioned in Luke 23, verse 2, but with no allusion to what they had done. Least of all did they tell how they had finally gotten the charge of blasphemy. John's narrative evidently has in mind Luke's account, for the question of Pilate to Jesus, whom he now takes back into the Praetorium, shows that he has been charged with claiming to be king. That's John 18:33. It was a charge that Pilate could not ignore without peril of arraignment before Caesar, who would brook no rival. This conversation between Pilate and Jesus is one of the striking things in John's Gospel. The question of Jesus to Pilate, that is John 18:34, is pertinent, for Jesus does claim to be the King Messiah in the kingdom of God, but not a political king, as the Pharisees wished him to be and now mean to charge him with claiming to be, when he said he was Christ a king, according to Luke 23:2. But Pilate is indignant at the suggestion that he cares for the Jewish theological refinements. "Am I a Jew?" he fairly blurts out as he demands the nature of the crime of Jesus. The reply of Jesus puzzled Pilate more than ever. The two men lived in different mental worlds. Pilate could not comprehend the language of Canaan. This kingdom, not of this world, was beyond his ken. Alas, one must add, many of the followers of Jesus have forgotten these words, for religious wars between Christians have not been uncommon. Pilate presses the point a bit further, and Jesus confesses to being a king who bears witness concerning the truth. At this, Pilate sees a gleam of light, for after all, what is truth? Truth stood before Pilate, and he did not know what sort of a thing truth was. "I am the truth." Of course, Jesus had famously said to his own disciples, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." There's a famous anagram on this question. Now here he resorts to Latin, so we have to get a Latin translation here. So I looked it up. The Latin is quid est veritas, that is, what is truth. Transposing the letters into the anagram makes it est vir qui adest. And in Latin, est vir qui adest means it is the man who is present. This is interesting speculation about this, by the way, in what this says about providence, that when you translate it from Greek into the language of the future, that is Latin, something strange occurs. So you can look that up online. We won't have time to consider that right now, but it is fascinating. Robertson goes on, but Pilate was no philosopher and no theologian. He was merely a practical politician, and he was sure that the realm of truth in which Christ is king in no way conflicts with the territory over which Caesar rules. So he makes up his mind that he is dealing with a mystic dreamer, perhaps a bit unbalanced, but certainly harmless. He openly avows his belief in the innocence of Jesus, to the utter chagrin of the Sanhedrin. When he proposes that he release unto them the King of the Jews, according to his custom, to set one prisoner free at the feast, with a playful turn to the title and their charge, he's surprised at their choice of Barabbas, a real criminal at the head of an insurrection, perhaps a zealot and a sort of national hero, though an outlaw, according to John 18, verse 40. More about this interview with Pilate next time. I want to put in a link to what C.S. Lewis said about the data that we can glean from the four synoptic Gospels, and not even looking at the rest of the New Testament. But the rest of the New Testament plays into Lewis's great question, of course, about the outrageous claims of Christ. Lewis was an atheist when he was a young man at Oxford. It was only through J.R. Tolkien and several other friends at Oxford that Lewis realized that there were only three options when it comes to who Jesus is. And the Christ myth option, by the way, has already been thrown off the table by everybody by 1920-25. So that's been resurrected with some success, but scholarly opinion of it 100 years ago was that it wasn't even worth entertaining. The three options about Jesus are: he was a liar, he was a lunatic, or he was the Lord, who he claimed to be. The outrageous claims of Christ. So I'll put that link on your screen. But who else can say, I am the truth, but God? See you soon.